Life Management Science Labs would like to acknowledge that we live and produce this podcast on the traditional lands of the Wurundjeri people. We'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands of our listeners and our international colleagues. We'd like to pay our respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. Hello everyone, and welcome to Work in Progress, the Personal Productivity Science Insights podcast produced by LMSL, the Life Management Science Labs. We are champions of life management science, providing structured insights informed by science and inspired by practice on key aspects of conscious living. Each week, we bring you scientific and practical insights on each element with the expert knowledge of professionals in the field. I am your host, Joanna. Let's get started. Hey everyone, you're tuning into Work in Progress, our personal productivity podcast, and I'm your host, Joanna, and today we're going to be talking about goal setting, specifically goal setting and lasting accountability to help our personal productivity so that you can achieve all your goals. And joining me today to help do this is Ben Kirk. Ben is an accountability coach, helping hold clients accountable to the actions they commit to and helping clients achieve their goals. Ben also has experience having been an executive coach, business coach, and even a fitness coach himself. Hi, Ben. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Hi there, Jennifer. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course. It's my pleasure. Before we dive into things, would you like to tell us a bit more about yourself and what you do?
Yes, certainly. Yes, I was a fitness coach. I did that for about 10 years in Sweden. And when I came back to Australia, I had to redo my qualifications. And I just realized that there's a lot of crossovers from being a fitness coach to what people do in the professional development space. So whether it is formal training, whether it is business coaching or executive coaching. So I just retrained myself. I did have a bit of business experience over there when I was in Sweden, and that's brought me to where I am now. So yeah, business coaching, executive coaching, fitness coaching, but now I've just bottled all that up into accountability coaching. And that is what most coaches should be doing. They should be holding their clients' feet to the flames. They should call them out when they're not fulfilling on their intentions or their tasks that they say they're going to do. And that's where my, let's say, more direct approach really starts to achieve breakthroughs.
Awesome. And what got you into fitness coaching in the beginning?
That's an interesting story. So I was always very, very small, a very short kid all the way through high school. I was one of the shortest kids in school. Then I had a bit of a growth spurt and I was taller, more lanky, and I just couldn't put on weight. And I just wanted to understand why they've got some people that seem to just look at weights and get muscly. Some people that seem to look at food and get fat. And then there was me that couldn't do either. And so I just wanted to study and learn why. And I just started to love it, experimenting on myself. I learned so much about the human body, the human mind, the central nervous system. And I've come from a family of physical education teachers and things like that as well, very sporty family. So it was sort of an easy step to make, certainly a long step away from my formal training as a jazz musician, but getting into that was, absolutely fantastic. And it's such a rewarding job to see the results that you get for people, to see the changes that it makes in their lives. And yeah, that's exactly what happens from the accountability coaching, I guess, as well.
Yeah, and what would be your favorite part about working, like one-on-one with people?
The one-on-one is really building the relationships, the trust, the rapport, the chance to sort of, I guess, be that real positive part of their lives. And we're able to go deeper. When I do the group coaching or any of the courses, it's up to them to go deep on themselves. But when it's one-on-one, I'm able to ask the questions deeper, next stage deeper, ask them why, try to really uncover that block that's holding them back. And that's something you can really do as a one-to-one coach. And you don't need a full hour to do that. I mean, we're able to do that in short bursts as well.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you so much for sharing that with us. And I'd love to get to know you more in a section we call Have You Met Ben? So here we just ask you some little get to know you questions before we get into everything else. So my first one for you here is, do you have a favorite book or anything that you're reading at the moment?
Yeah, I do have a favorite book. The book that started it all was Eat That Frog by Brian Tracy. A lot of my methods have come from that. And Brian Tracy was an early mentor of mine as well when I worked for his company, Brian Tracy International, and also Focal Point Coaching. So I really have liked his direct way of saying things, and Eat That Frog has become an absolute staple and probably one of the earliest books in this idea of getting the first most important thing done early in the day.
Yeah. And what would you say is like one really key takeaway from that book?
Yeah, it is that if you have a frog, it's best to eat the biggest and the ugliest frog earliest in the day, because your day's only going to improve after that. I have another saying, which is get the most important thing done early in the day, because your afternoon will invariably turn to crap. And that's about all the spot fires that tend to always creep in the afternoons. If you've got something that's important, it's important to do it first. Then you've got it done. And that was probably the biggest takeaway from that book, and it's a big part of my coaching.
Yeah, definitely. Awesome. Well, that brings us to our next one, which is movies. Do you have a favorite movie or something that you've recently watched that you loved?
Yeah, I'm a bit of a boxing fan, and so it's got to be the Rocky movies,
Oh, yeah.
all of them. I know some people don't like 3 and 4. I love them all, and certainly also after that with the Creed movies, and
Oh,
then you've
yeah.
got that's been brilliant. So anything along those lines, it's I know the simple stories, but I do like simplicity, and also that sort of hero's journey part of it too.
Yeah, for sure. I love the Creed movies. I thought the second one, is the second one? There's only two Creed movies, isn't there? Yeah, that one was really good. It feels like it came out like last year, but that one was it last year?
I'm trying to think now, because there has been a bit of crossover. Well, I
Yeah.
couldn't tell you. I've just been rewatching the Rocky series, so that's put me a little bit out of whack.
Oh, okay, there you go. Well, I feel like such a good choice. Love that. Awesome. Well, our next one is podcasts. Do you listen to any yourself?
I do. I listen to a lot of podcasts. It started with the Tim Ferriss podcast, of course. Then going after that, the Jocko podcast has been really instrumental for me as well. I am, and I have been part-time military, and so hearing his insights and carries over from what he's learned in the military and how that translates over to business and personal development as well. That's been fundamental. Since then, another podcast called The One Thing. It's in line with Eat That Frog, I guess, with prioritizing the one thing you need to do. Huberman Lab, that is all about those brain sciences. That has been absolutely brilliant. So they're probably, I'm not listening so much to Tim Ferriss now. I'm testing out a lot of other different podcasts, hear about what other people's thoughts are, but most of it is to do with behavioral science, habits, goals, what techniques people are using, what's working, and then just the general sort of business development stuff. So there's one called the Story Brand Format Marketing Made Simple, which, yeah, I find it interesting to also work on how to improve my own business.
Yeah. And what's probably one of the most interesting topics that you've covered in those podcasts?
I think it's probably coming more from the Jocko podcast. He talks a lot about leadership, a lot about leading by example. He talks about extreme ownership, and that is taking extreme responsibility for your actions. And I think that carries a lot over to people when they're looking at how they operate their business or their personal lives or their habits or their goals, and how how they how they might let themselves off too easy by not doing something. They might give what's called they might call it a reason that they're not following through on something. And I typically call them out and say, no, that is an excuse. That is not a reason. And I don't do excuses. The difference between a reason and an excuse is that a reason is something you have absolutely no control over. An excuse is something you had control over and you didn't catch yourself, or you didn't change the behavior, or you didn't work out a way that you could have subverted that. So that sort of ties into the extreme ownership, which is a book by Jocko Willink, and something that he alludes to a lot through his podcast.
Yeah, and I feel like that's what's really interesting about like excuses and reasons. You try to turn excuses into reasons, and I feel like a lot of people do that. I know I do that all the time, and that's, I guess, a really big challenge to try and reverse.
Yeah, that's right. We have to keep catching ourselves. I mean, I'm sure I do it as well. And we just need someone to call us out on it, I guess. So that is that third party, whether it is your partner, whether it is your mentor, whether it is your coach, whether it's your co-workers that you have a great relationship with. Sometimes for me, it's my kids might call me
Yeah.
out on that. But so long as we get sort of, have that third party perspective, it's very hard to catch ourselves in the moment unless we're doing some sort of review process where we're able to go through and litmus test ourselves whether we are actually making excuses for a particular behavior for doing or not doing something.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you for sharing that with us. I feel like those are some really great recommendations that people can get into. So my last one here for you is, do you have a role model or anyone that you look up to?
Mm. I was discussing this with a client the other day. We're talking about business role models, and I really love what Richard Branson does. Just the lifestyle that he's created himself, but he does something which, and it came up in a podcast with Tim Ferriss, where he talks about capping the downside. So when he's weighing up if he's going to try something new, if he's weighing up if he's maybe it's a particular risk or maybe it's starting a new business, he always looks at what the downside could be. And if the downside is still slightly positive or a slight improvement about where he's currently at, he's like, well, let's absolutely do it. It's called capping the downside. And that sort of philosophy that he's had right through his business, and also the amount of fun that he has in business as well. He's not afraid. He does all those skits. And now he lives the lifestyle, waveboarding every day or kiteboarding every day. It just looks fantastic. So his longevity and his fitness focus and all that, I'd say that's probably someone that I'd look up to there.
Yeah, that definitely sounds like the dream, doing that every day. So that's awesome. Great. Well, I think we're good to jump into the nitty gritty for today. So, my first question for you is, how do you define goal setting in the context of productivity?
Yeah, goal setting is that North Star. I believe that people need to know what they're moving towards in order to accomplish it. They need to have clarity on what that North Star is. They might not know exactly where it is. It might be a general direction, but if they're able to speak to it, they're able to sort of articulate it, then from there, we're able to bring things back to what are the steps we need to do to accomplish this? What's going to put us on the path to this North Star so we can accomplish that goal? When Brian Tracy talks about goals, he talks about it. You need to be able to explain it to a 5-year-old and have them repeat it back to you. And if you're able to do that, that means you do have good clarity on your goals, and someone else is able to understand that. And I certainly subscribe to this. The big part of it, though, is really that North Star, because we need to be able to break it down into actionable steps. We need to know, where are we taking those steps, or what are we taking those steps towards?
Yeah, for sure. And how do we sort of get to that point where we're able to have that sort of clarity?
A lot of questions. I have a formula which we go through. It is 7 steps. It's got a lot of questions. Probably the most pertinent question that's in there is, who do you need to become to achieve this goal? Or what sort of person achieves this goal? And that's normally step 2 of the process there. So they can either visualize or picture themselves achieving that goal, and where is the gap from where they currently are to where they need to be for that. Or maybe there's someone they know or have read about, or someone they look up to who's achieved that goal, and have a look at the gap from where they are to the personal attributes that person has. I mean, of course, there'll be financial differences, there'll be time freedom differences, but what are those personal attributes that they might need to change? That brings out what sort of habits do they have? How do they speak to themselves? What sort of people do they have in their circle? Whole lot of different routines they might do, or what can they imagine that person's doing? How does that person dress? How do they speak? How do they conduct themselves? So it's going through, and like I said, it's quite a long 7-8 step process. It takes about 40 minutes to an hour per goal to really pull it apart and ask the questions. One other part that's really important is obstacles. A lot of people like to talk about their goals and have them always positive. They're always going to have a positive goal. And many militaries around the world, when they're looking at achieving a particular objective, they look at what can go wrong. What is the enemy thinking? What might the enemy do? But also, what are some of the other obstacles they might come across while they're trying to achieve the objective? And this has that sort of pragmatic, realistic approach looking at the goals. And so I've moved away from this, the goals are completely 100% positive, to actually getting real on what are the things that are going to stop us from achieving the goal. A better question might be is, why haven't I achieved this goal already? It might have, a lot of people's goals, they've had these goals for 5 years or 10 years or 2 years. Why haven't you achieved this goal already? What has been consistently getting in the way? What do you need to change? What excuses are you telling yourself or you're giving yourself about that goal? And so that particular question as well is one to really go deep on and uncover. Maybe it's bad habits. Maybe it's a bad routine. Maybe it's just some mental block that you have. Maybe you're telling yourself you don't have enough money, so you can't achieve that goal, so you can't invest in this, or you can't do that. Or maybe you don't know the right people, or you don't have the right skills. Let's unpack all of those and then go deep on those. Okay, cool. Well, what skills do you need? How are we going to achieve those skills? That achieving that new skill could become a new goal. And then, of course, we do the same process then for how we're going to achieve that skill. If that skill is maybe it's some programming, or maybe it's a writing skill, or maybe it's a presenting skill. So, okay, well, who do you know that has that skill? What do we need to achieve in order to have that skill? Why don't you have that skill already? And we go through the same sort of process. That is that way of getting clarity. And one goal might turn out to be 3 or 4 sub goals. And then, of course, after that, we need to work out which goal are we going to chase first. I've got another saying that is, how many bowling balls can you hold at once? If we think about it, we've got 2 hands, so we can probably hold a bowling ball in each hand. So that's 2. We may also be able to carry a bowling ball between those 2 bowling balls in our arms. That's 3. But we're going to have to tread pretty carefully, because if we're not careful, we can drop that bowling ball on our foot. So really, we're looking at chasing down 2, maybe 3 goals at a time. And so that's the sort of the process we go through, work out the steps involved, the priorities involved, accountability coaching to hold them to it. And that's, I guess, my philosophy on goals in general.
Yeah. And how do you think that goal setting sort of enhances our productivity?
If we have our goals and we've broken it down into what we need to achieve for, say, the quarter, the month, the week, the subset of those goals is, or objective is what we really need to achieve daily. And if we can become clear on what we need to do each day to move incrementally towards our goals, then that is essential productivity. We're being productive towards that particular, it might be a large task or a large project or something like that. The way that we do that is by time blocking. So we might work out, what is the one thing that I need to get done today? What is the main effort that I need to do today? Or what is that high value task? Or what's that big hairy frog that I need to do today that's going to move me towards that goal? And then we time block it in there and we make sure that we achieve it. And the productivity part is moving that earliest in the day and making sure we achieve it earliest in the day. And depending on what sort of time blocks you tend to work best in, people talk about the Pomodoro technique. It's 25 minutes. Those of us that are a little bit more, let's say, ADHD, that 25 minutes can work really well. If we're doing something creative, though, or we need deep work, you might find that you can go down for 2 hours or 3 hours at a time. It depends on the task. It depends on how much we're forcing ourselves to do those tasks. So we need to be able to line up our time blocks with what sort of tasks we have. How does that make us feel? What's the situational requirement? What's the environmental requirement? How much energy do we need to have for that? And when we can become clear on that, and I guess that's the way that my coaching operates as well, is that really trying to understand and then guide the person on those particular tasks on how we are going to best shape those and frame those for the day. That's where the productivity comes from, but it goes all the way back up to those goals and then breaking it down. And what is that one thing that's going to move the needle the most for us?
Yeah, and how do people even begin to figure out what their goals are or what's going to sort of propel them forward?
I have a little process which I've adapted from Brian Tracy. It's called the 10 by 10 goal setting challenge. It was 10 days. What I've found though is that even though it's a super simple thing to do to uncover your goals, in this day and age, people just seem to have 5-day challenges, or they seem to be only able to focus on something new like this for 5 days. So the basis of it is that on day one, all that person needs to do, all you need to do is write down 10 things you want to be, do, or have. Super, super simple. It's not writing out 2 sentences. It's not writing out things with deadlines or with a category or anything like that. It's super simple. 10 things you want to be, do, have. It might be one word, car or new car, or it might be the model of the car. It might be a dollar amount. It might be a holiday location. It might be a relationship you want to improve or something like that. But just getting started and writing down those 10 things. Then on day 2, you do exactly the same thing again, but you don't look at day 1. So you're writing out another 10 goals. They can be the same. They might be different, but you don't look at the day before. And then when it comes to day 3, we're either going to put a category on it or we're going to put a timeline on it. So we might say that we're going to do things in one of these 4 categories: health and fitness, financial security, business career, and family relationships. And some people may also wish to put in another category, which is faith, sort of a faith-based or some sort of community-based. But I'd normally talk about those main 4. So then on day 3, they do the same thing again, but now they're going to try to put them into one of these 4 or 5 categories. Day 4, they do the same thing again, but not looking at any of their other previous days and building it out. And so it progresses. So the 5-day version is just doing day 1 and not repeating it, then another day with the categories. But over 10 days, what happens is your subconscious starts bringing out a couple other goals you might not have thought of. And then by the end of those 10 days, you generally have 10 pretty clear goals that have come from your current thoughts, come from your subconscious. And then from there, we start building those goals out. We'll put them into a life roadmap. We'll put them into the goal setting formula, and then we'll build them from there. It's just really important for people. And what I found was just to get people started in this. Goal setting can be scary for a lot of people. It can be scary because maybe they haven't done it before. Maybe they don't really know how. Maybe they're getting conflicting information on what you need to do when you set a goal. Oh, it needs to be future positive. Oh, it needs to be affirmative. Oh, it needs to have this, and that in it. I just wanted to break that down and get them started. So 10 things you want to be, do, have. Anyone can do that, and it'll take just 5 minutes. Part of this is we're setting up a positive habit as well. And we're also setting up a positive routine to be doing this daily, because it's going to be over 10 days ideally. We're now setting up a positive routine of thinking about ourselves, thinking about our future, thinking about our actions, and that all ties together.
Yeah, for sure. And what do you think is sort of the key for this to be successful in the long term? Because obviously we can do these things in the short term, we can think about these things, but how do we stick to them and ensure they're for our long-term betterment?
Yeah. About once a quarter, I tend to have my clients redo the 10 by 10 challenge. At the very least, once a quarter, we'll go through our mind life goals map, and that will we'll talk about the goals that they had. So revising the goals on a regular cadence. Some people like to write out their goals every day. Some people like to print them on a card and have that in their pocket. There's a lot of different ways people might like to review their goals or know how regularly they need to review their goals. But I think really once a quarter is still a lot more than most people. if people review their goals, it might be at the end of the year, or it might be on their birthday or on their anniversary or something like that. That's still just once a year if they do it at all.
Yeah.
So just have that process in place. And as a coach, we should be regularly talking about their goals and talking about the actions that they're doing, how it's moving towards that particular goal. Keep reminding ourselves of that.
Yeah, and you deal with accountability, that's like the main thing. So what are some strategies that you use or you would recommend to people to keep accountable to their goals or the things that they put their mind to?
Yeah. You really need an accountability partner, someone that you can share your goals to, someone that can ask you, how are those goals going? Not everyone has that. Not everyone has like-minded individuals around. Maybe someone's doing something that's completely different to what their family's always done. Maybe their family's always gone to university and they're like, no, I want to be an entrepreneur. I've got an idea that I want to follow, and they feel they can't share that particular goal with their family. So who else can you share that goal with? A lot of my clients don't have anyone they can really share the goals with in that way. And so that's me. I am the accountability partner, whilst also being the accountability coach or the drill sergeant for discipline or the productivity PT. I'm that sort of that person that can bounce those ideas off and share their goals to. So you really want to have someone that you can speak those goals to.
Yeah, definitely. And from there, so you found an accountability buddy, you've talked about your goals. How do you stay accountable to yourself and sort of actually doing those things? Because you could easily say to someone, oh, yeah, I've been doing all this, but you know that you haven't been doing it, for example, to the potential that you want to be doing it to.
Yeah. Uh, that's where the accountability coaching really came in. Um, the weekly review process is probably one of the most powerful and one of the success habits that I've identified through speaking to many high profile people or my clients that have been super successful. And that particular weekly review process is where we look at what worked in the week that's gone past. Did we do these things in alignment with our goals? And that weekly review process we can do on our own. That is an accountability in itself. Now, some people can do this weekly review process with their accountability partner if you're both working through these goals together, or your weekly review process is something you might share with your accountability coach, who then asks you more questions about what particular obstacles came up. So our weekly review process is nothing more than a very actionable journal. So we're sort of journaling about how the week went. My clients have certain success markers that we track that includes health and fitness, it includes productivity, includes routine, capacity, and did they win the week. But the process itself is kind of like journaling. So for that reason, you can also do that in the evening. And I think when people are really first starting out to look at their weekly reviews or start tracking their goals or start tracking their actions, having something they're able to look at daily also really helps. It's a bit like a daily journal. It's much the same sort of idea, but the way that I like to share this is to do the evening review so it's a little bit quicker. We don't want to have to spend 30 minutes every evening then looking how the day went, giving ourselves a mark, planning the next day, sharing with our journal how we felt about this. A lot of people, whilst they think they might have time to do that because it's important, over time, that it tends to fall by the wayside. And that's what's kind of got me to the point where I'm at now, is to keep all this stuff super simple, was that we all have great intentions on what journaling might look like. A couple of the habits that people fail on most is meditation and journaling. It's some of those things that they want to be able to work on, but it's because they might not see an immediate result for that. If I can make the evening review process a bit more actionable so that it's directly linking to how we're going to do our day tomorrow, then people, and also keep it really simple, really short, whether it's 5 minutes or 6 minutes, people have a greater tendency to do that. And so therefore we're getting that incremental improvement every week or every day for every week for those exponential results.
Yeah. And I guess in terms of like meditation and journaling, is that something that you would recommend everyone give a go?
I certainly would. A lot of the people that I work with are sort of those real A personalities that go out and get stuff. They're very, very active. it is very hard for us to do the meditation. Speaking from my own perspective, I've loved meditation. When I've done it regularly, it's really helped for me. At the moment, it's not part of my routine. It's not part of my morning routine. It's not part of my evening routine. It can be part of my evening routine because I just fall asleep when I'm meditating. And my morning routines focus on a few other specific things. And it's something that I guess in many ways I failed at consistently of trying to have meditation as a consistent part of my routine. The journaling for me, it is that just an actionable week, evening review process. And it's just reflection. I mean, that's what a journal is anyway, right? We're having a bit of a reflection about how we felt throughout the day. Some people wish to make it much, much longer, and they're welcome to if that's what helps them think through the day and think about how they can improve and what they can do differently.
Yeah, and I guess it all boils down to like who you are as a person and knowing, what type of person you are, because not everyone's going to want to sit there for 20 minutes and meditate. Or I know there's a type of meditation that involves tapping motions, which involves more movement. So if you're someone that's fidgety or you like to be up and about, like you can find ways to adapt as well.
Certainly. Yeah.
Yeah, great. Well, I was also wondering if you had any sort of practical tips you can give individuals to follow for sort of setting achievable goals. Like, I know people can be ambitious with their goals, but how do they set goals they know they can achieve, not just ones that sound really good?
I think when you are looking to set a goal, you want to give yourself actually there is different research into what these percentages look like. But the rule of thumb that Brian Tracy even used to talk about was you've got a 50% chance or 50-50 chance of achieving that goal. There has been some research that's come back that says it should be more around between 70 and 80% chance of achieving the goal. Therefore, you're more likely to be able to chase after that. You'll be more motivated. And I think the reason the 50-50s worked is because I guess we've built in some sort of accountability practice that you've got a coach or you've got a trainer that you're able to work with to achieve that, and they're able to keep pushing you. The 70 to 80% rule was more for someone maintaining their self-motivation to achieve that goal. So I think if we look at that, and I guess to know if we can do 70 to 80% or 50-50 chance of achieving the goal, we need to have something measurable in there. We need to have a timeline for a start as to when we want to achieve that goal by, but it also needs to be something measurable so we know if we've achieved that goal. We've also know how far away from that goal am I. So I guess from that, it's something measurable. You've got a timeline, and we've got somewhere, if it's 50-50 or 70 to 80% chance of achieving that goal.
Yeah, and is it okay to be a bit overly ambitious?
I think so. I think we need to have something that lights that fire in our belly.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So how do we deal with that, but also not sort of, getting our hopes up or, dealing with the fact that we might fail?
I think that we need to have the goal that's going to motivate us, that's going to push us to be better and change as a person. There was some research, I'm not sure where it was from, I couldn't even quote it effectively, but the idea that we're only really happy when we're moving towards a worthwhile goal. And for that reason, a big part of that, I guess, is how people are improving themselves or how people are developing. Maybe that's what's making us happy when we're seeing some sort of growth or development, the changes that we need to make to achieve the goal. So for that reason, I think the goal needs to stretch us. And if it's too big, some people love that challenge. I mean, I used to have a saying, tell me I can't do it, and I'm going to get started. There are some people like that who the more people tell them they can't do something, they're going to go out there and they're going to try even harder to do it. Think about David Goggins. Think about any of these other ultra athletes, these people that are consistently pushing themselves. So I think we need to have something that's going to stretch us a bit, but also knowing who we are as a person. And that also ties into your coach. If your coach is working with you, they should have a fair understanding about what are those buttons they need to push, what are the levers they need to pull, how they're going to motivate you to keep chasing that particular goal or keep doing those actions, even in those times where it feels like you're not achieving, even those times where it feels like maybe you're going backwards. Sometimes you have to go backwards to go forwards. But to have that coach or that support or that mentor that's able to identify those things, to know, does this person need just a 20% stretch goal, or do they need a 100% stretch goal?
Yeah, certainly. And I think that is really important, especially what you mentioned about knowing who you are, and also the fact that when someone tells you you can't do it, it makes you want to do something even more. And I feel like there's no point to a goal if it doesn't motivate you, because I know I've set so many goals for myself sometimes, but they don't push me enough to the point where I'm like, yeah, this fuels me. This is what I want to do. So, yeah, I feel like maybe being a bit overly ambitious gives you something to work for, even if it's a bit too much.
Yeah, 100%, 100%.
Yeah, great. Well, I'd love to move into our next section, which is our practices habit debrief. So, here, I'm just going to get to know some methods that you might personally employ or specifically suggest. So, is there like a method that you've used to improve your own goal setting?
Yes, it is a fillable template that I got from Brian Tracy. It is that 7-step process that we work through. Each box has got additional questions that will go into deeper, and people can use it themselves, or they can do it with a coach or with, I guess, a facilitated method. That is the best practice that I've found. Like I mentioned before, there's so much conflicting information about what needs to constitute a goal, and a lot of them are great. In fact, they'll probably all work. Really, the most important thing about having a goal is having a goal. So it's identifying one of those techniques and sticking to it and seeing it through. So my specific method, of course, I think it's the best. I've worked hard to develop it over years and testing it on different clients in different situations. And now we've built that into an app. And in that app, we're able to break down the goal further, a bit like a project management kind of software. But what the app really does is tie in the actions that you're taking, having a tracker there for either the habits or the productivity tracker. And also the most important part of it is that weekly review process to see, are we still moving towards that particular goal? So I think having that incremental approach to attaining the goals as well is super important, not just how you're going to set them or what method you use to set them.
Yeah. And in terms of like the 7-step process, would you be able to briefly run us through the gist of it and what people sort of get out of it, I guess?
Certainly. So the main part of the 7-step method is a brainstorm to start with. So you'll just have a blank sheet of paper, whiteboard, using one of those online Miro boards or something like that, and just brainstorm all the things you might think you might have. I do like to get people to do that 10 by 10 goal setting process first. Remember, that's the 10 things you want to be, do, have, and then repeating it each day without looking at the day before. From there, it comes to that second part of the process is putting a deadline to it. So once we've done a bit of a brainstorm, we're then just going to put out something that's imperfect about what that goal might be. Just sort of frame the goal, talk about it, put it in a bit of a paragraph, and then from there, let's set a deadline. So step 2 is putting that deadline on the goal. Step 3 is where we start to ask, what sort of person achieves this goal, or who do I need to become to achieve this particular goal? And we discussed the reasons behind that particular question as well, and that can really go quite deep. From there, I like to jump straight into the obstacles. What are the obstacles that might come up while you're trying to achieve this goal? Another question is, why haven't we achieved this goal already? You also uncover what sort of excuses that you might have for yourself. After that, we look at what sort of skills that we need to achieve the goal. Listing out all those skills, maybe those skills will become a new goal themselves to achieve. After that is, who do we need to support us to achieve the goal? So what sort of people are required to help us achieve that particular goal? And then from there, it's what habits do we feel that we need to incorporate into our lifestyle, and thus what sort of routines do we need to build to achieve the goal? Then after that, it is literally putting down 10 steps. What are the 10 steps we need to do to achieve the goal? We can prioritize it from there. And then if that first step isn't small enough, that means that we can't do it tomorrow or immediately. Then we need to just make that first step as small as it possibly could be, so we're always taking immediate action from our point of planning. So Brian Tracy used to always say, always when you've gone from your point of planning to the next steps, you must implement something immediately. Start that momentum straight away. It might be just scheduling something into your calendar. It might be doing a bit of immediate planning. It might be exporting the task list. It might be making a phone call to someone or signing up one of those people that you see that it says on this particular goal sheet, who do I need to support me for this? Giving them a call, sending them a text message. Hey, I'm going to do this. Let's get that ball rolling. That momentum piece is really, really important. I guess another part of it is that situational element as well. Some people, when they're in a situation or a mode, I guess, when they're doing goal setting, it's different. It's a different mode or a different situation or environment to when they're taking action on that goal. For example, they might be doing their goal planning in their favorite chair. It might be with a glass of wine. It might be with a coffee or a tea, but they might be in their favorite chair in the living room. When this time comes to take action on that goal, that might be in front of their desk. So we need to identify what the situationally where we need to be to start to work on that goal as well, particularly when we're identifying what our next steps are.
Yeah, and I'm seeing how like a lot of this is coming together with the 7 steps, and then also some of the challenges that might arise while you're asking yourself these questions, because you're learning more about yourself, but you're also, I guess, noticing some roadblocks or some obstacles that exist that are preventing you from achieving your goal or being where you want to be, hence why you're setting goals up in the first place.
Yeah, that's right. And that one question of asking yourself why you aren't at that goal already,
Yeah.
to uncover those excuses, to uncover that self-talk that you might have, is super, super important. It's hard to do. You might not want to ask yourself that question because you're going to get some hard truths. But it's super important.
And that self-talk, like how do we even begin to talk ourselves out of that self-talk?
We need to catch ourselves doing it. We need to put a bit of a habit or routine in place on positive self-talk. That might come by just that evening review method of looking at what worked throughout the day, looking what didn't work, but then immediately translating that to what am I going to do about it? What worked today, what didn't work, right? Understood. What am I going to do about it tomorrow? How am I going to fix that? What are we going to put in place now so I'm able to fix that tomorrow? And we're just correcting that negative self-talk, all those negative actions immediately, or at the very least at the evening, so we can move forward on that.
Yeah. And is this something that you use as well personally?
I use the evening review personally. That was actually, I built this for myself to start with, and then was fine-tuning it based upon the feedback from my clients. So I also have very strict routines that I need to put in my mornings and my evenings to make sure I'm performing at my best. That is because I'm a little ADHD. I can be a little bit all over the place at times. At least if I have these bookends, I know that I'm starting the day right and I'm ending the day right.
Yeah, awesome. And how do you feel like this practice has changed your perspective on life and I guess productivity?
Jocko Willink has a saying called discipline equals freedom. And he's able to apply that to a lot of different scenarios. The way that I apply it in this case is that if I'm disciplined on having my evening routine, setting up my morning routine for the next day, my time blocking, making sure I get the most important tasks done earlier in the day. If I'm disciplined about those particular areas, then I have the freedom to have the creativity. I have the freedom to go down some small rabbit holes. I have the freedom to respond to emails differently or have a bit of a change of location to work in. So long as I'm getting those main things done, I know that I'm moving incrementally forward towards my goals. And so that's the discipline equals freedom part. disciplined with my evening routine, setting up my morning routine, which in turn is setting up my high value tasks throughout the day that have time blocked in there. And around that, I'm free to go wherever I like. I'm an entrepreneur, I'm able to do that. But I think it also applies, I've got clients that are executives. It still applies to their work life as well.
Yeah. I love that discipline equals freedom. I feel like that when you say it over and over again, it makes more and more sense. And it's just so awesome. So thank you for sharing that. That brings us to our last little section for today, which is our open mic. So here, I'd love to hand it over to you. The floor is yours. You can chat about anything that you would like to.
Great. Well, really, it's to implore people to do something like the 10 by 10 challenge. They can just Google it. They can find links to it. It doesn't take much. I mean, people can sell it. People can, put a price on it, but it is literally 10 things you want to be, do, have. If you're not clear about your goals or you don't know how to set them, or even you want to just revise your goals, just write out those 10 things you want to be, do, have. The next day, do it again without looking at the day before. And if you don't want to put categories to it, do the same thing for 10 days. Really implore people to take stock of their lives in that way. And then from there, at the end of each week, before you start the next week, just to have this weekly review process. I do have links on my site where people can see what questions they might want to ask themselves. But once again, all that information is freely available. Of course, I like mine better because I've curated for the sort of people that I tend to speak to. But having that weekly review process of what worked, what didn't, what am I happy about? How do I feel about what I accomplished? What was my biggest time waster, or what was the biggest obstacle? Was this obstacle something that happened the week before? Did I achieve my main 3 tasks that I wanted to do this week? And what are my main 3 tasks for next week? Or the other question is, how am I going to apply what I've learned from this week for my next week? And then what are the main 3 tasks that I'm going to accomplish as well? Just by having that weekly review process, we identified that was one of the main success habits of high performers, was having a review process. Mine just happens to be a weekly review because I think that is the bare minimum that people need to do. A daily review process is even better. But at the bare minimum, a weekly review process. And you can do that on your own. You can do that with an accountability partner. You can do it with your dog. I think best of all, though, you can do it with a coach or someone who's there to support you, or a mentor. There's many different ways to look at it, but just do it.
Yeah. And that's really great. I feel like reflection and like looking at what we've actually done is something that we don't do enough of. And it's so easy to just kind of like go by life and just keep doing things without actually like taking note of how it's changing our lives, how it's impacting us, if we're growing from that. And I love the idea of an evening review. I feel like it's something I'm going to try and incorporate now, because I never actually take the time to think about, okay, what worked in my day and what didn't. So what will I carry on into tomorrow, and so on and so on. And I feel like if you have that intention to sort of better yourself and your life and like your goals and everything like that, it starts from doing things intentionally.
Certainly. And if you need any help with those questions, be sure to hit me up. I mean, I'm there on the socials at my website. It's got my email address on there that you can just, hey Ben, what's been working? I've got like 7 different versions for different people and all the different iterations that I've had. And it's not perfect for the individual, but you can add questions in there as well. Maybe there's a question in there that, that doesn't really resonate with me. That's Ben's style. He's a little bit too hard edge on this one. I need to have something a little bit softer. But it's just great to have that template to start with, and then you fine tune it and make it your own.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you so much, Ben, for coming on the show and sharing all these wonderful tips with us. I know I'm definitely going to take something from this and add it to my routine as well, but it's been an absolute pleasure.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you very much for having me.
That's okay. And if people want to find you, where are some places we can go to?
Yeah, wintheday.com.au, of course, the .au for Australia. Everything's there. There's a lot of links in there. There's a few forms people can put their details in and get some downloads. Also, Win the Day, I'm there with Do Better, Be Better, Win the Day on Instagrams, LinkedIn, Ben Kirk. Really, I think if you Google Win the Day Australia and you move away from the American football team that has that as their slogan, you'll find me.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. We've also got Ben's details down in the description below if you missed that. But thanks so much for tuning in, and we'll see you guys next time. You have been listening to Work in Progress, the Personal Productivity Science Insights podcast produced by the Life Management Science Labs. Listen to episodes from LMSL's 10 Life Management Perspectives on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or other podcasting apps on your smartphone. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider rating our show, sharing it, and subscribing to our channel, as it helps other people find it and us grow to bring you more quality resources. More of our work can be found on our website pp.lmsl.net, where you can join our movement. I'm Joanna. Thanks for tuning in.